Hey, Jamari's here. I'm here to just talk about my journey box and kind of where it took me in my research and just share my topic and what I talked about and why I think it's very important and why I selected this one in particular. My topic is talking about the Emancipation Proclamation that that was approved and set up by Abraham Lincoln. This happened in 1865 and, changed the 13th Amendment that December 18th. And this is generally a celebrated event, celebrated moment in American history, as it rightfully shows. Um, obviously, the abolishment of slavery was a huge deal to Black Americans across the country, both North and South. But the reason why I made this a topic is because in celebrating that event, what could often get lost is the narrative of the transition from Black Americans being enslaved to being free. Because legally, and the terminology says that these individuals, Black Americans, are free. But how they were treated and the journey that they had to go on to even get half as much of these guaranteed freedoms that they were told that they would have, I think that narrative has gotten lost, and a lot of people don't really understand how hard it was to go from being enslaved to integrating within a society that believes that you can't handle freedom. And so, specific things on top, there's things like the Jim Crow laws that, again, was taught. But when you really think about abolishment of slavery, a lot of people who were enslaved, they lived with their masters. Their masters provided the bare minimum of resources for them to live, but they had something. Now that you abolish slavery and their masters no longer own them, they have nowhere to go because without reparations, you don't have ownership of property. With a society that still continues to alienate you, and don't believe that you are capable of handling freedom, you also don't have job. You don't have jobs. So people won't hire you. You don't have property. So now it's hard to eat. It's hard to live. Find somewhere to stay. So you think about just the basic needs of a human being. That is all disappearing because now, with the abolishment of slavery, they're not with their masters or with their families. Some 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 Black Americans at the time felt it'd be better in their interest if they stay with their masters because they have nowhere to go. They don't, no one will hire them. They don't know where to stay. And so some Black Americans felt like the best option for them was to stay with their masters, where even with them, they were able to get the bare minimum in that situation. And so when talking about things like the Reconstruction period, that was an important time that lasted for about 12 years. And it was designed to help with that transition, but it was met with a lot of resistance from people within the countries, especially with a lot of Southerners and people who come from the Confederacy. And so, with this resistance, it really created a huge challenge for Black Americans to create just a decent life for themselves. You know, in the project, I talked about the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and what they did. They've done a lot of things to commemorate the soldiers who fought in the Civil War, specifically the Confederate soldiers. And they wanted to keep that memory alive. And what they had to do was, a lot of instances, they would try to get statues put up. They would go into education. They would revise textbooks, and they would revise the information that was being put out into the media, trying to change the narrative of the Civil War. And by doing this, this puts an image into a lot of people's heads of what slavery was meant for. They tried to shape slavery as if it was a act of mercy or grace towards Black Americans, because they don't know how to handle freedom. They don't know how to take care of themselves, dehumanizing. And I think that gesture of just affecting textbooks alone sends a huge message to a lot of younger people who are learning this for the first time. And in their heads, the first thing they think of is, okay, slavery's abolished, but it really helped these guys out. It really helped Black Americans out, which that's not the case. That's not true. And so that's something that really stuck out to me, that I felt like it needs to be talked about more, because there's images that I have in the journal box where it talks about, or just it depicts just how dehumanizing it was to be in that position. There's a cartoon that I selected, and it's an artifact, and it's called A Literacy Debate in the Darktown Club, The Question Settled. And in the image, in the cartoon, it's three Black Americans who are dressed in what seems to be patriotic clothing, but they're in this room where they've destroyed the room. It's bloody, and these Black Americans look like they've gotten into a fight with one another, and the picture's just super messy. The room is messy. Their clothes are beat up. They're bleeding. All of these things, and that sends a message of saying, like, Black Americans don't know they don't know what to do with freedom. But it's like, when you're limited in education, jobs, when you're limited in just ownership and property, it creates a disadvantage for Black Americans to even have the basic life. And so I think that's something that I really wanted to touch on with this project. There's another photo of just a bunch of Black Americans huddled up together, just being freed at the harbor. And it's like, in this picture, it's like they have all of their things, their belongings, and they're all standing there. But these men and women and children don't have anywhere to go. They don't have anywhere to go, and they have to figure out what's next. What do we do next? What do we do now? No one's going to help us out. And so that is, in a nutshell, just kind of what my journey box is about, and what it talks about. It's about those issues, and just a different way of thinking about how freeing the Black Americans in abolishing slavery became, one author said that it became a sickness. A lot of people die from plague and disease and hunger. And that's something that I think gets missed when discussing the Emancipation Proclamation. And so that is essentially the gist of the project, because that has an effect on today. When we think about how ghettos start up, when you think about just these areas, the projects where a lot of a lot of African Americans group together and try to, make a living for themselves. Like, it roots from this era. It comes from this era, and it becomes a huge gap within the culture of Black Americans, because there were others who chose to stay with their masters, and culturally it created a slight division among each other, because on one end you have people who are trying to push and make something for themselves, and others are just trying to, this is the best option for me. I just have to stay with my masters, and hopefully I'll rise quicker that way because I've shown loyalty to them. So where Black Americans have showed their loyalty, whether it's to their masters or to each other, it's created a huge division in our culture. And you see this today, people trying to leave their environments. Do they give back? Do they go to a suburban area? All of these things are connected, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with this project. So thank you for watching this video, and I really appreciate the opportunity.